Hi, my name is Hitendra Patel. I represent the Global Innovation Management Institute. We are honored to be part of the Global Council for Innovation Organizations because we are very excited about the opportunity of spreading innovation globally through certifications and standards. This council that we have put together will allow us to share best practices, exchange ideas between universities, between governments, between companies, between different geographies. It is the exchange of these ideas and this ecosystem that we are building that will help us close the gap and democratize innovation everywhere, and improve the quality of life of every human on this planet.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. So our speaker today is Carolina Durán, and she may be having some technical difficulty at this moment. So why don't we get the camera on for Gemma and myself and Rafa to come on and see if there is members from also the Dubai government excellence program inside here as well, so we can maybe just have a conversation. So Gemma, first, it's always great to see you. Maybe you can introduce yourself first, and also how your first entry into the GCIO came about.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So Gemma Isles, I'm based in Perth in Western Australia. So I've had the privilege of being part of the Global Innovation Management Institute as part of their think tank. And I guess my first introduction was a few years ago when I met actually Rafa in Dubai. I was speaking on a program there around innovation. I was working in government at the time here in Australia, and innovation was a really big passion of mine. And it was fantastic to see the drive and push by the Dubai government around innovation. And so I had the pleasure of speaking on one of their programs there through the Dubai Government Excellence Program, and have maintained contact over the years with through the Global Innovation Management Institute. So I guess now it's quite a few years on. I'm really fortunate. I'm a CEO of a health technology company here. We're supporting hospitals with real-time automation platforms, which is really exciting. I'm looking at how we support operations and enable healthcare workers to actually be providing the best patient care that they can. So I've gone from talking about innovation and promoting innovation capability building, and fantastic to see the programs being run through Jimmy, to now working in an innovative organisation where innovation we live and breathe every day as we try and make impact within hospitals. So it's fantastic. So my introduction, I was very honoured to be able to be part of one of the independent members of this council, and I'm really passionate about what we're trying to achieve through this council.
It's great, Gemma. Rafa, if you don't mind sharing, what is the impact of a framework, the use of a framework in the government, which is what the Dubai government is using now? There's a framework. It's the framework that belongs to the Dubai government, developed by the Dubai government, endorsed by Jimmy. How does that framework actually create scalability and knowledge transfer, common language, common framework, and other things? What are you seeing?
Hello, Hitendra and everyone. So to answer this question, I think the framework has really enabled to have a common language among all the different entities that are part of the Dubai government ecosystem. There are more than 50 entities around it. And having a standardized way of understanding, defining, and managing innovation is very powerful. They are different, these entities are at different level of maturity, different level of sophistication in their own journeys, but all can have a common understanding of what are the key areas that they need to focus when they want to enhance their practices. They want to start building innovation focus areas, innovation portfolios, start building capabilities, and start creating the processes that help them to go from ideation, incubation of ideas, all the way to really introduce new services, new improved products, or new improved policies. So I think that's the real tangible contribution of this framework.
And so just to say something similar, Jimmy has been using its framework and it's been deploying it across the world with companies and corporations and universities. And what we are seeing is as suppliers use the same framework as well as the big corporation, as universities use the framework, certainly a common language and common framework has been created, and the ecosystem begins to become very powerful also. And as English is a common language, as we all speaking with each other right now, we understand each other quickly. The same jargon is taking place in Jimmy's framework too. So frameworks are critical. Frameworks are critical because they create a common language, common approach to talking about something. It allows us to train people. It allows us to audit where you are today versus where you could be tomorrow. And that is GCIO's big objective, is find frameworks which are very simple, elegant, and then basically deployable across multiple ecosystems. We have Carolina Durán, who's joining us right now. Please add her to the call. And Carolina Durán is also a member of the GCIO. Hi, Carolina. Always lovely to have you on this.
How are you? Nice to see you all.
Yes.
I'm supposed to have the background, but it kind of, there's too much light.
No worries, Carolina. We can see you. So Carolina is from Colombia, and Gemma's Australia, Rafa's representing right now the Voice of Dubai. We are from the United States, but we're global. And the whole idea is frameworks of innovation, how those frameworks allow us to scale. And Carolina is one of those rock stars that we were lucky and fortunate to get to know and meet. She is a force, as we all know, and she's unstoppable. And when she puts her mind to doing something, it will happen. So she doesn't just talk about it, she gets it done. So Carol was one of the forces during COVID, and she was responsible for making sure Bogota is a city. And Bogota as a city is bigger than most countries, number of people and the amount of logistics and everything else. And any city is 4 or 5 days away from basically no food and a revolution. And her job was to make sure everybody was getting food, everybody was safe, people were working during COVID. And she's got her own framework to talk about. So what we're going to do now is going to give the floor to Carol. Carol, take the time to introduce yourself, and you have the floor. And then Gemma will do a Q&A with you, and others, as they get questions, will ask questions too. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patel, for this kind introduction and generous words. I am super happy to be here today with a new hat. Today I'm representing building markets for Latin America. And yes, after having been Secretary for Economic Development in the city of Bogota, and before that, heading Corporación Ventures, we developed a framework throughout the expertise of being on the ground, contributing to the creation, consolidation, and growth of startups, but also small companies. A startup is also a small company, normally in the nature of, and in the initial stage of creating the business. So having worked in a lot of crisis moments for the world, but also for Colombia, we have developed a resilient method of creativity and innovation. And that is why I'm super happy to be able to be here with you as part of also as the GCIO, because it's not only about entities, as you know, Itendra, but it's also about the people who are behind those entities that are able to create these innovative methods to approach problems, difficulties, or crisis. So having said that, well, I am economist. My background is in economics, but I am passionate about technology and how technology can close gaps. How can technology foster development, equal development? And now I'm working with the concept of shared prosperity. I'm a mother of twins, avid salsa dancer, and love to travel and read. So thank you. That's a bit about me. But now I want to go into the presentation. I know Erika was going to help me. Thank you, Erika. Okay, so today I want to take this few minutes so we can have 25 minutes to question and answer. I'm going to take this few minutes to talk about a problem, a worldwide problem. Please continue, Erika. The problem and the possible solution to that problem. So this is a presentation in Spanish. I'll send the English version. I apologize why we had sent only the Spanish version, but we have the English version soon. The problem is the inequality. the inequality has been growing rapidly in our countries, and COVID brought that also into our countries as it widened that gap. That has a lot of impact and costs in terms of social cost, environmental cost, health cost, and educational cost in the long term for society. But it also generates a lot of frustration in terms of social mobility. And that social mobility or limited mobility creates negative effects that also somehow detonate in social unrest. So social unrest in Latin America especially have been severely felt in the last 12 to 24 months. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, because behind that high inequality and that social unrest and high inequality is a whole world of unmet needs for historic and many years for historic times, unmet needs that haven't been resolved in the past 100 years. So the impacts are very profound in our society. Please let's continue. Thank you. And everyone knows, everyone here who has been working with SMEs or with startups or with anyone who has an idea, wants to create something new, knows how hard it is to be an entrepreneur and how hard it is to innovate. And when you are part of vulnerable population defined as displaced population, migrant, refugee, a woman head of household, maybe a diverse LGBTA plus member of any type of sort of religion different than what the typical norm says, it's even harder to create something new. Those communities, those that have been affected by the crisis have been more affected if you belong to these vulnerable population. So being able to create a business, which is hard and costly, especially in Latin America, and those who want to do it, but also belong to a vulnerable population, and those who have done it and are trying to do it, being vulnerable, being from a marginalized population, but doing it in a crisis moment like COVID is even harder. So this is what Building Markets Now wants to work with in a framework that I'll show you in a minute. We are not targeting the first billion of people who have those most unmet needs that are in the base of that, let's say, pyramid of Maslow. No, we're talking to those 3.4 billion people who are above that first trench and who are those who are creating jobs and creating the GDP of our countries. So those communities that have been affected by race, gender, migration status, sexual orientation, or discapacity in any sort or way will be and are having been, and they're being productive in our societies, but are not attended sufficiently. So let's continue. Please continue. So this is the framework. This is how we operate. We had this initially for the city of Bogota on how like the economies coexist with those who have characteristics from the past, from the present, and from the future. But this framework does apply to Colombia and does apply to Latin America, and with a lot of research from the OECD and other allies and partners, we can see that this is something that really applies to at a global level. And what is this? This is thinking of the productive needs and the productive units, let's say SMEs, that work from the past, those who are working in a very informal typology of economy from a very precarious manner of subsistence. Those are like towards the left of this chart, that have no technology. Maybe it's only really subsistence, right? No access to markets, no access to being able to hire people, no access to higher incomes. It's very marginalized. It's in the left side of this chart. When you try to become formal, especially in Latin America, our costs are so high, and you have to become formal in order to be able to sell more. And let's say restaurants, some of the agricultural goods and the markets start going, the food markets start going to the right, the artisans start going to the right to become formal because they want to produce and grow. And that's like the green side, green column of this methodology. The cash flow tends to go to zero, because immediately all those resources and helps and subsidies and aids that are established and that were also reestablished during the pandemic and enhanced during the pandemic go to the very, very most poor of this part of this chart. But once you start becoming formal and paying taxes and doing everything right, quote unquote, all those things are taken away, and all those aids are taken away. And then you start going into cash flow negative, and there's no policies that help, no institutions that help. Very rarely do we have ecosystem incubators, accelerators that are like targeted to that population. So we reach to the middle of that chart where we have the SMEs. The SMEs who represent 90% or create 90% of our GDP in Latin America, who create 95% of the formal jobs in Latin America. And 63% of those SMEs that are in the, let's say, present economy of that chart, in that blue column, are head and led by women. So this is super important because it's precisely there where there's an absence, absolute absence of public policy and institutional help, and also an absence of ecosystem that is targeted to those needs. And they face all the asymmetries of the market. Please go back 1 second. They face the lack of access to capital, lack of access to talent, bilingual talent, lack of access to technology, lack of access to opportunity. So these are the people who have businesses, who have products, who have services, who have employees, who have probably even clients, but then comes the end of the month and they can't pay their wage or the salaries to their informal employees. So that's what we all know, and we have known as the Valley of Death. 85% of the startups die there in the Valley of Death, but also it's called the missing middle. So now we continue towards the right of that chart. It's like the big companies and the startups will start getting leveraged by the market itself, and they start becoming cash flow positive once they generate positive EBITDA, and so on and so forth. So what are we thinking here? The methodology for building markets and for what we did in the district of Bogota and how we're focusing around the ecosystem is how do we help and provide productive instruments for this middle of this chart, this SMEs who are in the middle, the missing middle. So let's continue. That's what we consider, that the approach should be very practical. And what we're working now is finding these companies, building capacities, and connecting them to new opportunities. It's very simple, but very powerful. And what we're actually doing now, Tendra, you didn't know this, partly is we're using technology to map out all the good opportunities that exist worldwide. And we have 72,000 opportunities now mapped in a platform that connects to the SME producers, to the small businesses who could be suppliers to these big companies who have big purchases, who have big tender offers, and we connect them with artificial intelligence in the platform, and we design a route so they will match. They normally do not match. So what we do is we design a route for all these SMEs that could eventually match with these tender offers, and we connect them through capacity building. So this is very, very powerful because it's super simple, but what we're trying to do is not teach them how a business model canvas works, maybe not teach them how to do and prepare for investment, but we actually find a business that they could apply to, and we find a good tender offer, a big tender offer that they meet those requirements, and if they don't meet them all, we actually go inside and help them meet them. So continue, please. So that's when we create this theory of change. The theory of change comes from creating businesses, from literally building markets in the base, but for the middle. So it's in the base of what we do. It's in the core. It's productive. It's not assistencialista. It's not assistance. It's in the core of supply or demand of our business, but we do it for those who are in the missing middle. And that's the power of change. We use data. We use capacity building for access to market. We have a working capital fund that only funds those activities that are connected to those businesses opportunities. So whereas this SME has to match with this opportunity, we are able to fund whatever is needed in order for them to produce, to connect to that business and that, let's say, new offer. And we have this all with technology. And that affects obviously not only the SMEs, but the people that work at that MSMEs, the families of those who work at those SMEs, and at a higher level of this theory of change through generating higher income, generating more wealth and prosperity, generating shared prosperity, we create more equal societies, inclusive societies that generate development and at the same time, hopefully, peace. This is important to say. I don't know if you want to go back just 1 second, because when building markets started, it's very important to say it started in Afghanistan 20 years ago in 8 countries. We did Afghanistan, Vietnam, Congo, Syria, Vietnam. So these are countries that have been embedded by conflict. And now they chose to come into Latin America through Colombia. And through the wonders of LinkedIn, they found me. And they chose Colombia because Colombia has gone through a lot of social unrest, as I described before. And Latin America is very polarized now politically. So this approach, framework of international economic development, to work with the missing middle, but understand that we coexist with the past, with the present, and the future, the disruptive as startups of the future. This methodology, hyper simple, using technology, is what is somehow enhancing prosperity, shared prosperity, and creating a path, a sustainable path, an apolitical path to peace. So this is it. I wanted to show it to you. We have the model, how it works in Turkey with the Syrian refugees in Turkey. And we had a couple of examples of success cases, but I think, I don't know, in terms of time, if we can expand on that, Itenda will let me know. And I would definitely have open for questions, how the model works, what type of interventions we do. But the theory of the framework is exactly the same. It's understanding that we have past, present, and future coexisting with different specific needs for each of these text productive units, and how we focus on those who detonate the change, which is the missing middle, which is where there's a lack of opportunities for them. That's it, and I would listen to all of you.
Thank you, Carolina. It's been a while since we've seen each other. We had the pleasure of meeting in person last year in Belgium at the Innova Flanders event. And I got to hear you speak then about the amazing work that you've done with vulnerable communities and businesses. And it's really exciting to see your framework come together and continue on even outside of a crisis, which obviously with COVID, that was the accelerator for many organisations and many government departments to step in and really support the smaller businesses that needed that extra layer and access to different ecosystems. So I guess, have you seen much change in, I guess, the growth of some of these SMEs because they've had this support? And it would be good to understand maybe a couple of examples where you've seen, you know, how this impact has been.
Yeah, sure. The access to information is super powerful. We think it's not that relevant, that maybe what these SMEs need is capital. And actually what they need is knowledge, and they need context, and they need access to markets. Capital is kind of a result of all that, right? And so, yes, we've seen them grow. Okay, so from all those SMEs that have entered the platform and this methodology, they've grown by 200 times, twice-fold the amount of new contracts they have. We've created, through this intervention, 74,000 new formal jobs to meet those new businesses that these SMEs are getting, right? we've been able to create new contracts for a value of $2 billion for these SMEs. Contracts, not aid, not money that we're giving away. It's contracts that they're winning, bids that they're winning, and they're delivering upon on, and they're creating new jobs in order to deliver. So that's very, very interesting. We've worked as an entity, as building markets for more than 20 years with 32,000 SMEs. And what we've seen from them is that all those who have entered the platform had never had access to an international market, for example, never. So from 32,000, none of them had ever been able to reach an international market. And all of them, at least once, have been able to sell abroad now from their original country. So it's really mind-blowing what just accessing information can do for them. Because that's the most important thing of our methodologies, just connecting them to the opportunities. The rest comes as like natural, organic.
Absolutely. And I think with small businesses, it's also skill building, that you can't just put your hand out and expect to be given money, that you've got to be able to work and grow your own skill set, your own connections and your network. And I think that's what's really exciting about building markets and how that works. What role has AI had to play? So you talked about that your AI is working to connect different people. Has that grown over the years? Has that been explored with? Was that always the case? Or have you seen that as a new way of really growing the network of connections that are happening?
Gemma, great question. So just let me go back to the other part. It's very important to say that we evaluated the amount, the impact that the aid had, the amount of money that was given away for free without any conditionality versus the money we put into building capacities for actual productive results. And we would see that the money was given away for aid was, in the best of the scenarios, used to pay debt, right? In the best of the scenarios. Normally they would even use it to just go out and travel. If they bought a machine, the machine was like there sitting with a lot of dust and like a coat hanger. It wasn't used for anything productive. And we did the evaluation. And when you would go and see what the money that we were putting into all these productive measures in order to connect to these new businesses, when we were providing its little capital, not as much as we did on the aid part, very little capital, but with a lot of support building capacities and technical advisory, that went a long way. They were able to create jobs. They were able to complete new businesses. They were able to really change the narrative of their businesses. So that's something important. Money that's given out for free doesn't work. That's completely proven. And in our country, it's not an exception. People are just become kind of lazy with that. Honestly, I just can say it right now like this. And now, and then the second question, artificial intelligence is very powerful, especially nowadays. So yes, this is like the version 2.0 of our platform, because initially when we were mapping the route for each of these SMEs to connect to these opportunities, tender offers, we were doing it almost manually. We're doing it literally manually, like with people kind of thinking of what they were lacking, what they were requesting, and we're just kind of look up on what they needed to and what they were lacking, right? That was it. And we created the learning agenda based on that. Now AI does it for us. So they can just see, okay, this matches with this, kind of like a little bit like Tinder. This can match with that according to the criteria. And then it kind of spells out what they really need to work on. So we evaluate 5 functional areas. They get a report of those functional areas, but it's not theory, it's not theoretical. It's based on real actual contracts that are now available on the platform for them. 72,000 available contracts. So yes, you sell hats and you want to sell to these companies. Okay, now according to this is what you need. So it kind of works also with like many other platforms, like LinkedIn, I guess, that says like, if you want to match with these companies, this is what you need in order to get there. That's what artificial intelligence is doing for us.
It's great. It's I think we're seeing more and more now the role of AI in being able to bring connections, being able to interpret probably a lot quicker than what we would do if we were manually managing those connections. And I think I've worked in local government before here in Australia, and we did a lot of work around supporting our small businesses. But a lot of that is manual management and those relationship building. So if we can speed that up, make it more easily accessible, then I think it's a fantastic outcome for not only the business owners, but also for the economy as well. So I'd love to open up to anybody else who'd like to ask a question of Carolina. She's got some fantastic knowledge and experience in this space. So now's the time to ask.
Okay, in the meantime, that maybe the others are preparing any question or any comment that you have for Carolina, let's listen to the other video promo that we have from Dubai government for GCIO. Laura, if you can help us. Please raise your hand or use the chat for any question or comment that you have.
المجلس العالمي للمؤسسات المبتكرة مجلس فريد من نوعه يمثل مؤسسات عالمية من مختلف قارات العالم. هذه المؤسسات مختصة بالابتكار وبدعم الابتكار وبتعزيز ثقافة الابتكار في المؤسسات وفي الجهات الموجودة في مختلف هذه المجلس. بيكون له دور كبير في دعم تبادل ونقل المعرفة ونقل الابتكارات الموجودة في مختلف قارات العالم، مختلف المؤسسات الموجودة على مستوى العالم، ودعمها وتأثيرها ونقلها للمؤسسات الموجودة سواء في دبي وفي دولة الإمارات أو على مستوى الدول المشاركة في هذا المجلس. برنامج دبي للتميز الحكومي يعتبر أحد الأعضاء المؤسسين لهذا المجلس، والبرنامج كان له دور وباع كبير في دعم الابتكار والمبتكرين على مدى ال20 سنة الماضية من خلال المبادرات اللي يقدمها، من خلال الفئات الموجودة في جائزة برنامج دبي للتميز الحكومي. البرنامج له دور كبير في هذه المبادرة وسيدعم الابتكار والمبتكرين وثقافة الابتكار على المستوى المحلي وعلى المستوى العالمي، وسيساهم في نشر كل الإنجازات وكل الابتكارات الموجودة على مستوى دبي للعالم بأسره.
Lovely, thank you for that. So I'll just pull out the call again if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Carolina.
Yes, David Fernandez has his hand raised.
Lovely. Go ahead.
Hello, Carolina from Mexico. How are you?
Hello.
What are the challenges that Colombia is facing with now this type of, let's say, democracy that's coming on the government? We have a big issue in Mexico, you know, a lot of institutions have disappeared because of this new way of thinking in government. So the support for SMEs through government or governmental funds are being so low. So with that in mind, what should we do in Latin America, especially in Latin America, to work out new ways of making SMEs to be funded, maybe to be supported, and to be to get an international point of view, because this is something that we're facing in Latin America. I don't know if in other parts of the world, but in our countries, in our region, we're having this issue where government is basically getting all the funds to different things that are not innovation and are not SME support. So what would be like your recommendations, or maybe what's in it for Latin America on these issues, Carolina? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And yes, I can feel what you're saying. I am so sorry that INADEM was also closed down by this AMLO government. INADEM was for us the rock star of innovation entrepreneurship in Latin America. We would like always took it as a reference. And yes, it's happening here as well. Impulsa, which is kind of the INADEM of Colombia, is also being restructured. And I do believe that President Petro, and for those who don't know, President Petro is left-wing new president. And after 15 years of very right-wing presidents in Colombia, we have a very left-wing president who used to be a guerrilla. So he doesn't believe a lot in terms of technology and entrepreneurship. He thinks that's something that really we shouldn't be supporting. However, it's interesting. However, he does talk a lot about the SMEs. So what I would suggest, and this is what we're seeing now, is not relying on the government for what we need to do. We just have to work with what there is, but we need to work a lot with corporate philanthropy. Actually, Building Markets is funded by Hilton Foundation, Coca-Cola Foundation, BHP Billington, some bilateral cooperation like Canada and the USA mainly. And what we're trying to do is bring those resources that are much more stable in time and in kind, also in how they see things, in vision for our region. Those resources are the ones that we're seeing pouring into Latin America now. Those are the ones we have to be able to use productively, because they're not philanthropic aid resource. They're like productive philanthropic. This is what I call corporate philanthropy resources. And we can work with the governments in the sense of have them as allies. For example, in Latin America, in Colombia, maybe we're talking about circular economy, and the government is very keen on renewable energy. So if we have that open space, so we can match SMEs to those two things that we agree on, we can bring in those resources from the corporate side and have some, be able to have some room to maneuver in Colombia and Latin America. I've gone a lot to Panama and Ecuador as well. I see that even they're a dollarized economy, so that's actually good for those who are like now thinking in pesos, and they're much more stable in their rule of law. And they're welcoming also a lot of these resources. So our companies, our SMEs in Colombia, a few of the Mexicans as well, could find like a safe haven in Panama and Ecuador that also have a lot of tributary incentives to operate. So we have to think a lot about nearshoring, about being able to connect throughout the whole region in order to collaborate and to find better spaces for our SMEs. It's not going to be as it used to be for us in Mexico and Colombia for our SMEs and our startups, but still, we already have a very sophisticated ecosystem. What we need to do now is diversify it and create a much more global connections. This is why this moment with Dubai and with the GCIO is so important, is because these global connections is what's going to elevate us from our locality and from our local problems now in terms of politics and in terms of economics. And it's going to bring that diversity that our SMEs and ecosystem needs in order to be much more stable and apolitical in time. So yes, we can do a lot in terms of public policy, but we can do much more with the private sector embedded in what's happening right now in our markets.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. It's a great question. We've got another question in the chat, Carolina. So someone wanted to know exactly how you reach out for demand from the big companies around the world, and how can AI help in finding those in addition to matching them? And is there a way to help using AI for the smaller companies, the startups who may be in need for some cheaper supplies?
Okay, thank you for that question too. So we find them very, very manually. We have to talk with a lot of allies and big buyers that are part of those allies, like chambers of commerce and chambers of or guilds or associations of big companies. In Latin America, that works a lot. I'm not really sure how it works in other parts of the world, but here we do have the Association of Fishermen, the Association of Candy Cane Producers, like there's association of everything. So we find those big buyers and we actually talk to them. We do a design thinking workshop. We find their needs, because it's not mandatory to publish their procurement tender offers publicly online. It's not a requirement. They only do purchases by word of mouth, literally. And so they also want to do inclusive purchases and inclusive procurement. but they don't know how because they can't find these SMEs. So we go to them through the chambers of commerce, we're doing a lot of media, by the way, a lot of media, like 70 articles have been gone out about the importance of doing inclusive production, of working with small producers, of working with SMEs, but it's not an act of charity. It's because it's good business. So we show them how, we showcase them how, and we actually have a speaker series every amount of time, like once a month, where they kind of go out and say how good it has been for them to work with SMEs, how good it has been to go and diversify and find other type of suppliers. So building the capacities with the buyers side is something really important in this equation, and it's something really new for building markets. We've done it previously in a manual way, but now we're doing it in a very organized way, and hopefully AI could also help us map that out at some period. Right now it's not doing it, but it will help us find also those big buyers in the world. Mm-hmm. Now what we do is, once we have good buyers, like let's say Hilton Foundation, Hilton, the hotels buy a lot. They buy towels, shampoos, everything. That kind of like rolls out to all the chain of hotels. So we have many hotels now buying from these SMEs, and so on and so forth. So it's very clusterized and by word of mouth.
I think what you just mentioned around, it's not just about doing business, it's about doing good business and helping organisations understand their responsibility to helping others within their community that maybe not have access to that information. And I think it's wonderful that you're doing a speaker series to help promote that as well. So I think in wrap up, Carolina, what would be your main takeaway for the audience listening to this GCIO speaker series? What's the core takeaway that they can learn from about how to help small business and help support economy growth as well?
Well, I think that this public-private partnership is vital for anything in life. Really, we can't do anything alone in either spectrum of being. And that after COVID, what we've learned is that capitalism can be a conscious capitalism, that the concept of shared prosperity must and should be promoted, because it's how we can really create sustainable, equitable economic development for all. And if we have very solid, equitable economic basis for our society, we can bring prosperity and peace to all. So I do believe formally that the markets are a good and a very important mean to get there. And technology is an enabler. But then again, it's all about people. So thank you for being here and listening to us, because it's us, the people behind all this, the people who are receiving all this. It's the human being that really makes this possible, connects it. So even though we have AI and we're going to have ChatGPT, and I love ChatGPT, by the way, they're not going to be replaced because we really need to have these connections forged. And it's us who actually bring the creativity to the ground and make things happen for the good of all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you not only for joining us tonight, but also being part of the GCIO and helping to promote how important innovation is across the globe and how important it is that we do connect as people. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. We look forward to seeing you at our next monthly speaker series.
Thank you, everyone. Saludos, Dr. Hassan, and obviously Dr. Patel. Thank you so much for this space. Love seeing you, Gemma. You did a great job.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everyone.